Have you ever really thought about what happens when you have a legal problem? I mean, where do you even start? It's not as simple as just walking into one type of court. Today, we're going to untangle the whole system of India's state courts, taking a journey from the very top right down to the courts in your own neighborhood. So, let's start with that exact question. If you needed justice, where would you actually turn? The answer is probably a bit more complex than you think. It's not just one building, but a whole ladder of courts, each with its own special job. And today, we're climbing down that ladder together, one step at a time. So here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off at the absolute peak with the High Court. Then we'll get into the incredible powers it has. After that, we'll look at who actually gets to be a judge there. From there, we'll head down to the local district courts, the ones you're most likely to deal with. And to finish, we'll explore a totally different, fascinating alternative to the whole system. Okay, let's start at the very top. I want you to picture a pyramid of justice in every state. Right at the top of that pyramid, just a step below the Supreme Court of India, but above everything else in the state, sits the High Court. This is the big one, the ultimate judicial power within the state. Essentially, it's the final stop for almost any legal appeal within a state's borders. And here's where it gets kind of interesting. You'd think it's one per state, right? Mostly, but not always. For example, Punjab and Haryana actually share a high court. And Delhi is unique. It's the only union territory that has its very own. All in all, there are 25 high courts across India, and each one is in charge of watching over every single lower court in its area. Now, that is a massive amount of responsibility, right? Overseeing a whole state's legal system. To do that, a high court needs some serious power. And in the legal world, that power has a specific name: jurisdiction. So what can a high court really do? Let's break it down. So jurisdiction, what is that? Put simply, it's a court's official power to even hear a case in the first place. You can think of it like a court's territory or its area of expertise. A court in Mumbai, for instance, has no business making a ruling on a property dispute in Delhi. Why? Because it doesn't have jurisdiction there. It's the line that defines a court's power. The High Court's authority is huge, and it's split into four main types. You've got original jurisdiction, which is for cases that start right at the High Court. Then there's appellate jurisdiction, which is all about hearing appeals from lower courts. There's also revisitory jurisdiction, and of course, the super important power of judicial review. First up, original jurisdiction. Think of this as the express lane for really important cases. We're talking about the big stuff, like major disputes over state revenue, messy legal battles over a will, or divorce cases. These can skip the lower courts and go straight to the top. And most importantly, if you believe one of your fundamental rights has been violated, you can go directly to the High Court for help. Next is what the High Court is probably most famous for: appellate jurisdiction. Here's an easy way to think about it. Civil cases are usually disputes between people, things like arguments over property, contracts, that sort of thing. Criminal cases are when someone has broken the law, like theft or assault. If a case is decided in a lower court and one side thinks the decision was wrong, they can appeal to the High Court for a second opinion. Okay, so we've established that the High Court has an incredible amount of power. But that brings up a really important question. Who are the people we trust with all this authority? I mean, who actually gets to become a high court judge? Let's look at what it takes. As you can probably guess, the requirements are incredibly strict. First, you have to be a citizen of India, and you can't be over the retirement age of 62. But here's the real test. You need a solid 10 years of experience as a judge in a lower court, or you need at least a decade of experience as an advocate practicing in a high court. That is a very, very high bar. And how do they get the job? Well, the appointment itself is a pretty big deal. Every single high court judge is officially appointed by the President of India. But the President doesn't make this decision alone. It's done only after getting advice from some of the top legal minds in the country, like the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the governor of that particular state. All right, we've spent some time at the top of the pyramid, but what about the courts where most people's legal journeys actually begin and end? Let's climb down the ladder to the grassroots, to the district courts that handle justice on a local level day in and day out. So at the district level, the system kind of splits into two main branches. On one side, you have the civil courts. They deal with disputes over things like money, property, and contracts. On the other side, you have the criminal courts, which handle all the cases where laws have been broken. Each side has its own structure and is headed by a top judge. And this table right here, well, it lays out that structure perfectly. you can see there's a really clear ladder within both the civil and criminal courts. For civil cases, you might start at a court of small causes and work your way up to the court of the district judge. And on the criminal side, things start with different classes of magistrates and go all the way up to the court of the session judge. So, we've walked through the formal court system with all its layers and procedures. But what happens when that system gets overloaded? When it's too slow, too expensive, or just too complicated for the average person? Well, that's where a really amazing Indian innovation comes in, the Lok Adalat, which literally means the people's court. There's this famous saying in the legal world, justice delayed is justice denied. And that idea is at the very heart of why the Lok Adalat was created. In the traditional court system, cases can sometimes drag on for years, even decades, leaving people stuck in limbo, waiting for a resolution that feels like it's never going to come. So what is it exactly? Well, the Lok Adalat basically flips the script on how we think about justice. It's not about having lawyers fight it out so one side can win and the other can lose. Nope. It's about bringing both sides together to talk, to find a middle ground, and to reach a compromise that everyone can live with. It's all about finding a quick, fair, and inexpensive solution. And the benefits here are just huge. First, it is incredibly fast. We're talking cases often settled in a single day. There are no court fees, which makes justice accessible to everyone, regardless of how much money they have. It also takes a massive load off the regular courts. And since it's all about compromise, people often walk away feeling like they were actually heard. But here's the real kicker. The decision is legally binding. It has the same power as a judgment from a regular civil court. So, all of this brings us to a really big final question. As the formal court system continues to struggle with huge backlogs and delays, could this idea of a people's court be the answer? Could this model of fast, cheap, and compromise-based justice be the future for handling the everyday legal problems that people face all across India? It's definitely something to think about.